The Henry Cort was originally launched as the Pillsbury, one of some 40 whaleback ships designed by Alexander McDougall. Launched in 1892, it was sunk at least 4 times in 42 years, but never lost a crewman in those accidents. Whalebacks were cigar-shaped steamers and barges with large turrets on the deck. McDougall said the design would shed waves and be more stable in heavy weather, but that claim wouldn't keep the Cort from sinking. It was underwater for nearly the entire winter of 1918 after a collision on Lake Erie. The wreck was raised and rebuilt in Ohio for over $250,000. Its rounded submarine-like hull was flattened and cranes were added in 1927. The Whaleback made headlines that next year when it became the first steamer to undertake winter navigation on Lake Erie, hauling a load of steel bars from Cleveland to Monroe. But those accolades would be marred when the ship made headlines again, ramming a small fishing boat and killing 2 anglers. On November 30th, 1934, the crew were on their way from Holland, Michigan to South Chicago for a load of pig iron for the Holland Furnace Company. They made it within 35 miles of Chicago when southwest winds spun them around and pushed them back to Michigan.
We tried to hold to the norther to get by the Sabos, but the wind drove us several miles off our course, so we decided to try to make Muskegon Harbor. And getting near Muskegon Harbor, the sea seemed to go down, and we steered in on the ranges for about 5 miles. And as we were coming through the piers, the sea caught us on our starboard side and landed us over onto the north breakwater, smashing a hole in our side, and she hung to the wall and wouldn't go inside. So we backed her and landed alongside of the breakwater, where she filled with water and sank in 5 minutes.
2 holes on the ship's port side were opened up, and the Cort settled on the bottom around 10 p.m. that night. Coast Guardsmen responded to the sinking by sending out a small 36-foot lifeboat, but as soon as it approached the Cort, a wave washed 2 surfmen out of the boat. Jack Dipert, a 23-year-old Pentwater man, was lost just 5 months after joining the Coast Guard. The cutter Escanaba was dispatched from Grand Haven, pulling alongside the wreck and lighting it with its 1 million candle power searchlight. They were answered with a flashing light aboard the Cort, and the Escanaba radioed in that the ship was broken and its stern was submerged. News headlines were thankfully incorrect that next morning, and a corrected version was in the Chronicle that night. Coast Guardsmen had managed to get a line to the ship and took the men off by breeches buoy. 5 rescuers brought 25 crewmen back to shore, lashed together on a tether for a 3,000-foot march on the slippery breakwall. The ship's first mate and cook were hospitalized, and the commotion drew some 50,000 onlookers. 4 of those gawkers were hospitalized when their cars collided, trying to get a look at the shipwreck. The mighty Cort, dubbed the most powerful civilian icebreaker on the lakes, had ironically made it through the worst storm of that century, sailing into Two Harbors, Minnesota during the 1913 storm with some 500 tons of ice on her decks. Today it rests in pieces on Muskegon's north breakwall, just where another storm put it over 70 years ago. The Cort's aft mooring rings are still down on the bottom, one of the few pieces that wasn't salvaged for scrap metal. Its characteristic snoot for what was nicknamed a pig boat. Also visible are the massive gears that turned its deck cranes and countless pieces of hull plating in a boiler. Whalebacks disappeared off of the Great Lakes soon after the Cort was lost. Their short hatches couldn't be unloaded easily, and many became barges and tankers. Still others, including the Clifton, Wilson, Barge 115, Sagamore, and Colgate, met the same fate as the Cort, shipwrecked forever on the Great Lakes.